No one in the palace dared to breathe loudly. The desert wind outside screamed against the sand-colored walls, but inside the silence was sharp enough to cut. Prince Karim Al Fahd, the youngest son of the Saudi royal family, lay weak on his bed, his breathing shallow, his eyes barely open. The palace physicians, wearing spotless white coats and stern expressions, moved around him like ghosts who had run out of miracles. Doctors from London, specialists from Germany, traditional healers from the Middle East, all had been flown in. They all tried something different. Injections, IV drips, herbal mixtures, electrotherapy, rituals, everything that money and power could provide. But nothing worked. The prince continued to slip away like sand falling between fingers. The king himself stood at the foot of the bed, his regal posture trembling. The queen sat beside her son, whispering prayers through her tears. Their fear was palpable, and the anxiety spread through the palace like wildfire. And still, among all the gold, marble, and imported doctors, there was one person who had not been called to speak, yet had quietly watched everything. A Filipino caregiver named Daniel Rivera. Daniel wasn't meant to be in the prince's private wing. He was assigned to help elderly guests and visiting dignitaries, someone low in rank, someone invisible in a place full of powerful men. But he had worked in the palace long enough to learn that when things were desperate, no one cared about rank. They cared about results. He stood by the doorway, holding a tray of towels he never got to deliver. He wasn't watching the procedures or the machines. He was watching the prince's hands, specifically how tightly they were curled. He noticed the strain in the prince's jaw. He noticed the faint tremble on the prince's shoulders every time someone touched him. These were not signs of a dying body. They were signs of someone drowning in something else entirely, but it wasn't Daniel's place to speak. He knew that. Until the king saw him standing there and barked, "You, why are you here?" Daniel froze. His heart hammered in his chest. Part of him wanted to run. Foreign workers were never meant to attract royal attention, but he forced himself to bow. "Your Majesty, my apologies." "I was only delivering towels." The king waved his hand sharply. "Leave them, go." But Daniel didn't move. Something in him refused to walk away. He swallowed hard and said carefully, "Your Majesty, if I may speak." "I think the prince is not sick." The room went rigid. Every doctor turned, annoyed. The queen gasped softly, offended by what sounded like an insult. The king narrowed his eyes. "Are you suggesting the finest doctors in the world are wrong?" Daniel shook his head respectfully. "No, Your Majesty, but I have cared for many patients. Not royal ones, not rich ones, but human ones. I have seen this before." The head physician scoffed. "This is stress-induced organ collapse. His body is shutting down." Daniel met his gaze, calm. "No, sir. This is emotional shock. He is shutting himself down." The king stared at him. The queen stopped crying long enough to whisper, "What do you mean?" Daniel stepped closer, his voice steady but humble. "Filipinos have a saying, ma'am. Hindi katawan and makasakit kaluban. It means the body is not sick. The heart is." A ripple of confusion spread through the room. Daniel continued, "The prince is not reacting to medicine because his illness isn't physical. He is overwhelmed. Something happened. Something he cannot express. Something he is carrying alone." The king slammed his fist on the table. "Enough! You know nothing about my son." But before he could order Daniel out, the prince weakly whispered, "Let him speak." Everyone froze. Even the machines beeped slower. Daniel moved closer, his voice soft. "Your Highness, something heavy is inside you. It is suffocating you." The physicians exchanged looks, unsure what to say, because the prince slowly turned his head toward Daniel with tears forming in his eyes. For the first time since he fell ill, he spoke clearly. "It wasn't supposed to happen," he whispered. "I didn't mean for him to die." The queen gasped and covered her mouth. The king stepped forward in shock. "Who? What are you talking about, my son?" But the prince didn't answer his family. He answered Daniel. Daniel knelt beside him. "Tell me, Your Highness." "It's okay. The prince choked on a sob. My friend, my closest friend since childhood, we were riding, the sandstorm came so fast, ... I tried to get him to shelter, but he didn't make it. The room felt colder. The prince continued, his voice shaking. His father blamed me, my brothers blamed me, I blamed myself, and every day since. I could not breathe. Daniel bowed his head with understanding. The prince whispered, "It hurts so much." Daniel took the prince's hand gently and said, "Then let it. You cannot heal what you refuse to feel." The doctor stared. This was not medicine. This was something deeper. Daniel knew what to do next. It wasn't a procedure. It wasn't a drug. It was a Filipino practice older than colonization itself. He placed a warm hand on the prince's chest, not the skin, but the place where pain lived underneath. Your Highness, in my country, when someone is hurting inside, we perform the act of pagpapalawag. It means to help someone loosen their hidden pain. The king frowned. And how does this work? Daniel replied softly, "You listen, you comfort. You help the person release what they have trapped inside. No judgment. No pressure," the queen whispered. "Like healing the soul?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, ma'am." The king wanted to dismiss it, but the prince's grip tightened around Daniel's hand with desperate trust. So Daniel continued, "Tell me everything. I will hold your pain until you can breathe again." And the prince broke. He cried not the silent tears of royalty, but full sobs, years of unspoken grief pouring out like a dam finally breaking. He spoke of the sandstorm, the guilt, the sleepless nights, the blame from family members who didn't understand. He confessed how he had avoided sleep because nightmares kept him trapped, how he felt unworthy of living, how he wished he had died instead. With each confession, something changed. His breathing steadied, his muscles relaxed. His heartbeat normalized on the monitor. The doctors stared at the numbers completely stunned. The queen cried harder, but now from relief. The king wiped his face without hiding it. Daniel stayed beside the prince for hours, guiding him through the storm of emotions until the prince's voice finally weakened, but his eyes had life again. He whispered, "I can breathe." The head physician checked the prince, asked vitals 3 times because they were improving so quickly it made no medical sense. The king stepped out of the room, overwhelmed, but he returned minutes later with something in his hand, a gold medallion shaped like the royal crest. He handed it to Daniel. "You have done what no doctor could." "You saved my son's life." Daniel shook his head. "Your Majesty, I didn't save him. He saved himself." "I only listened." The king placed a hand on his shoulder. "And sometimes that is the greatest form of healing." For the next few days, the prince continued opening up to Daniel. Every story, every memory, every tear released more pressure from his chest. Daniel guided him through breathing exercises, grounding techniques he had learned from caring for trauma patients, and Filipino emotional practices that focused on acceptance rather than suppression. The doctors monitored everything and were forced to admit that emotional healing had done what machines and medicines could not. The prince regained his strength. His appetite returned. He slept peacefully for the first time in years. One morning, while Daniel was arranging pillows, the prince said, "Do you know why I trusted you?" Daniel turned, surprised. "Why, Your Highness?" "Because you looked at me like a person, not a prince." Daniel smiled gently. "Pain is the great equalizer, Your Highness. It makes all men the same." The prince laughed softly, the first real laugh anyone heard from him since the tragedy. "Then allow me to do something as a man, not as royalty." He stood, still weak but determined, walked to Daniel and embraced him. Daniel, for his royalty, never hugged staff, ever. But the prince held on and whispered, "Thank you for saving my life." Daniel slowly returned the embrace. "It was an honor to help you heal." Unknown to both of them, the king and queen were standing at the doorway, watching silently. The queen wiped tears as she whispered to her husband, "Allah sent him." The king nodded. "Yes, and we must not forget what true healing looks like. After the prince fully recovered, the king ordered that Daniel be promoted, not just promoted, but elevated to the position of Royal Emotional Wellness Advisor, an unheard-of title created specifically for him. He was given a private residence within the palace grounds, a salary that exceeded even senior officials, and full respect from every member of the household. But Daniel remained humble. When the prince asked him why he stayed grounded despite everything, Daniel simply said, "Because healing is not done through rank, it is done through heart." The prince smiled. "Then teach me. Teach me how to heal others too." And Daniel did. He taught the prince breathing techniques, Filipino grounding practices, compassion-centered emotional care, and the importance of listening without judgment. Soon, the prince began helping others in the palace who struggled with anxiety, grief, or stress. He would always say, "A Filipino caregiver taught me how to survive. Now I will pass it on." The news traveled quietly through the royal family, and although it was never publicly announced, everyone in the palace knew the truth. A simple man from the Philippines had healed a prince with something more powerful than medicine, the human heart. Years later, Prince Kareem still carried the gold medallion he gave Daniel, but now he wore it beside something else, a small wooden rosary Daniel once used when he was homesick. When people asked him why a Muslim prince wore a rosary, he always said the same thing: "It reminds me of the man who saved me." A man whose strength came not from titles, but from empathy. A man who reminded me that healing begins when we stop being princes and start being human. And somewhere in the palace garden, during quiet evenings, Daniel often sat on a bench watching the prince laugh with his family again. The desert wind had changed. It no longer sounded like grief. It sounded like life returning. Because a Filipino caregiver armed not with medicine, but with understanding, had reminded them all that sometimes the soul needs healing more than the body. And that healing, no matter what country you come from, begins with someone who listens.